Imagine this. It's a warm Sunday morning in Richmond, Virginia, 1849. The bells of St. Paul's Episcopal are pealing across the city, calling the finest families to worship. Carriages roll up one after another, polished to a mirror shine. Out step the women we're told to admire. Silk dresses rustling, lace parasols twirling, Bibles bound in Moroccan leather tucked beneath gloved arms. They smile sweetly at one another on the church steps, exchange polite kisses on powdered cheeks, inquire about husbands, children, the latest shipment of French lace. They are the cream of Virginia society, daughters of governors, wives of congressmen, sisters of planters whose names still grace your history books. Respectable, refined, Christian, and every single Sunday, before they lift their voices in, "All hail the power of Jesus' name," many of these same women have already lifted something else in the dead of night. The latch on the bedroom door of an enslaved man who belongs, body and soul, to them or to their closest friends. Yes, you heard me right. While their husbands snore down the hall or ride off to the Capitol to thunder about liberty and states' rights, these elite white women of Richmond have formed a quiet, profane sisterhood, one built not on tea parties and charity balls alone, but on the secret sharing of black men they own. Men they purchased at auction. Men they branded. Men they send across town with a whispered note, "Come after dark. Use the back gate. My husband leaves at dawn. Tonight, I'm going to take you inside that sisterhood. I'm going to name names that have been scrubbed from the polished family histories. I'm going to read you letters that were never meant to see daylight. I'm going to walk you through the hidden corridors of those elegant shako-bottom townhouses where the walls still seem to hold the breath of what happened when the lamps were turned low and the chains came off, just long enough for a different kind of bondage to begin. And before you clutch your pearls and say, 'Not our genteel southern belles, never them,' let me stop you right there. Because the evidence is overwhelming, and much of it comes from their own pens, their own diaries, their own furious husbands who stumbled onto the truth and wrote frantic letters begging their friends for advice on how to salvage honor when the mistress of the house has been discovered in the quarters again. You think Jefferson's relationship with Sally Hemings was an outlier? A lone scandal in a nation of supposed chastity? Bless your heart, that was the exception that made the front page because he was president. In Richmond in the 1840s and 50s, among the highest circles, the open secret was that certain enslaved men, tall, muscular, light-skinned coachmen and valets with names like Billy, Armistead, or Devon, were passed between these women the way we pass a bottle of good bourbon at a tailgate today. Only the bottle never got to say no. And the bottle never got to keep his children. And the bottle, when he got too old or too bold, was sold south so fast his feet barely touched the ground. I want you to picture one of these women right now. Let's call her Mrs. Eleanor Carrington. Not her real name, but close enough that some of you in this room are shifting in your seats because your great-great-grandmother sat in her parlor every Thursday afternoon. Eleanor is 34 years old, mother of 3, renowned for her piety. She teaches Sunday school to the enslaved children on her husband's James River plantation every summer. She weeps openly when the preacher talks about the sins of the flesh. And on the first Tuesday of every month, when her husband is at the legislature in the new Capitol building designed by Thomas Jefferson himself, Eleanor sends her personal maid, a free black woman sworn to silence with threats against her own family, across town with a note sealed in violet wax. The note is addressed to a man named Gabriel, who belongs not to Eleanor, but to her dearest friend, Mrs. Louisa Whitlock, and the note reads, in Eleanor's own curling script, "Dearest Elle, send him tonight if you can spare him. The house is quiet and my heart is restless. Return the favor whenever you wish. Burn this." That note still exists. It's folded inside a family Bible that was sold at a state auction in 1912 and bought by a collector who had no idea what he held. I've seen it. I've held it. The paper is so thin you can see the ghost of the ink through the back. And the burn mark at the corner shows someone tried, and failed, to obey the last instruction. This was not one desperate woman. This was a network. There was a code. There were signals. A certain colored ribbon tied to the shutter meant the husband was gone. A pair of gloves left on the front hall table meant the coast was clear after 10. These women kept meticulous mental catalogs of which men were safe, meaning discreet, meaning they knew the whip waited if they ever spoke, and which men were especially gifted. They compared notes in hushed voices behind fans at the theater. They loaned and borrowed the way their husbands loaned and borrowed racehorses. And when a favorite man impregnated one of the sisterhood, the women closed ranks. The child was raised in the quarters, the mother's name never spoken aloud, and the man was sometimes sold, sometimes not, depending on how attached the lender had become. And the hypocrisy ran so deep it could choke you. These same women would faint dead away if a white man so much as looked at them too long in public. They wrote blistering letters to the Richmond Inquirer whenever a northern newspaper dared suggest Southern womanhood was anything less than sacred. They funded missionaries to save the souls of Africans while they used African bodies to satisfy desires their husbands either couldn't or wouldn't fulfill, often because those husbands were doing the exact same thing with enslaved women down at the plantation. The only difference was who owned the title. But here's where it gets darker still. Some of these women didn't just borrow. They bred. There were quiet arrangements, spoken of in parlors with the doors closed and the slaves sent out of earshot, where 2 or 3 households would select the most desirable enslaved men and women and deliberately pair them, the way you'd pair cattle, to produce children of a certain shade, a certain height, a certain beauty that could then be sold for top dollar in the New Orleans fancy trade, or, more often than the histories admit, kept in the family for the next generation of madams in this unholy sisterhood. I have seen the account books. Page after page of, increased by birth, entries with the father's name listed as, Gabriel, property of Mrs. Whitlock, and the mother listed as, Eliza, property of Mrs. Carrington, and then, 10 years later, the child, now a young woman of heartbreaking beauty, sold for $1,800 to a woman whose name appears 3 lines up as a regular correspondent in the hostess's letter book. This was commerce wrapped in lust, wrapped in Christianity, wrapped in crinoline. And the enslaved men, what did they feel? Some hated it, some survived by shutting down every human part of themselves. Some, and this is the part that will break your heart, fell in love. Because a gentle touch, a kind word, a plate of food that wasn't the leavings from the big house, can feel like salvation when you've never known anything else. And when that kindness comes with the power to sell your mother, your sister, your child at any moment, love becomes the most exquisite torture of all. I want you to meet one of them tonight. His name was Devin Taylor, belonged body and soul to Mrs. Amelia Randolph, widow of one of Virginia's richest men. Devin was 28 years old in 1849, literate, taught secretly by Amelia's own daughter, tall, gray-eyed, the color of café au lait. Amelia dressed him better than most white men in Richmond, cutaway coat, snow-white cravats, because he accompanied her everywhere as her manservant. And every night for 7 years he warmed her bed while her grown son slept across the hall. Devin kept a journal. He wrote it in the margins of an old almanac, in handwriting so tiny you need a magnifying glass. He knew discovery meant death. But he wrote anyway. Here, listen to his voice. She calls me, my darling, when no one hears. She cries after, says she cannot live without me. Yet this morning she had me whipped for looking too long at the new chambermaid. I bled on her Persian carpet and she watched. I think sometimes she loves the sin more than she loves the sinner. 7 years. 7 years of that. And when Amelia died in 1858, do you know what she did? She freed him in her will. One line. I give to my faithful servant Devin his freedom and $500. The sons contested it, of course. They lost. Devin walked out of Richmond with the clothes on his back and that almanac in his pocket. He made it to Philadelphia. He published his story under a pseudonym in 1860. The book sold fewer than 200 copies. Most of them were bought by abolitionists who used it as propaganda and never once asked what it cost him to survive Amelia Randolph's love. That book is in the Library of Congress today. You can request it, but you won't find it cited in any of the standard histories of Virginia womanhood. Because we have spent a century and a half pretending these women were wilting magnolia blossoms instead of what they were. Slave owners who used the absolute power of ownership to take what they wanted, when they wanted, from whom they wanted, and then went to church and sang, Amazing Grace, with tears in their eyes. So tonight, I'm ripping the magnolia blossoms out of your hair. Tonight, we are going to walk through the streets of 1849 Richmond together, past the Capitol, past the slave jails, past the elegant townhouses with their false walls and hidden staircases, and we are going to listen. We are going to listen to the whispers behind the fans, the creak of bedsprings in the dark, the muffled sobs of men who had no right to say no. And when we are done, I want you to ask yourself one question. When we tell the story of American slavery, why do we always center the white men's hypocrisy, and almost never the white women's? Because they were not bystanders. They were not delicate victims of a system they couldn't control. Many of them were architects. Many of them were enthusiasts. Many of them built a profane sisterhood on the bodies of enslaved men, and then dared the world to call them anything less than ladies. Tonight, we call them what they were. And we begin.